My wife cheated on me with someone I considered a friend. I didn't just walk away, I went scorched earth. I divorced her, exposed everything, and made sure she faced the consequences. This is how it all unfolded. I'm 27 and my wife, Em, is 26. We'd been married for just over a year when I discovered her betrayal, the other man. Jay, a so-called friend of mine, also 27. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how things started so perfectly before it all crumbled. We met when I was 22 at a friend's wedding. Em was a good friend of the bride. While I was close to the groom, our friends thought it would be fun to play matchmaker. So they sat us at the same table. When I saw her, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was stunning. As the evening went on, we got to talking and realized we had a lot in common. The chemistry was instant, and it felt effortless to connect with her. We ate, drank, and danced the night away. At one point, we kissed right in the middle of the dance floor, completely caught up in the moment. When the bride and groom saw us, they teased us, grinning from ear to ear. They wanted to know what was going on between us, but we just laughed it off and carried on enjoying the night. Strangely, we didn't exchange numbers before leaving. A week later, though, I got a text from her. The bride had given her my number. I didn't even hesitate to say yes when she asked me out, and that date turned into a full-blown relationship. For the next 2 years, life was great. Sure, we had little arguments, but nothing serious. Everything felt right. I proposed after 2 years, and less than a year later, we were married. I was sure I'd found my partner for life. Then, everything came crashing down just before our first anniversary. At first, it was small things that didn't sit right. She became overly protective of her phone. Her girls' nights became more frequent, and our intimacy faded to almost nothing. I brought it up multiple times, but she brushed me off every time. She called me insecure, said I was imagining things, and acted like my concerns weren't worth her time. Over time, I stopped trying to fix things. I pulled away. I stopped kissing her goodbye in the mornings, and we barely spoke unless it was about something important. The distance between us grew, but deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong. One night, while she was asleep, I finally decided to look through her phone and laptop. I was nervous but determined. Strangely, I found nothing. It almost made me second-guess myself. But then I remembered stories I'd read online about people hiding evidence in their cars. I decided to check hers. I grabbed her keys, opened the car, and there it was, a second phone. My stomach dropped. I knew then what was going on, but I needed proof. When I unlocked the phone, there was only one contact. I read through every message and saved every photo. The betrayal was undeniable. That night, I printed out everything and started researching divorce lawyers. I stayed up until morning, fueled by anger and heartbreak. The next day, I found a lawyer I liked and emailed him, but I still didn't know who the other man was. Out of curiosity, I called the number from the phone. I planned to pretend I was from a phone company, but before I could even make up a story, Jay's contact popped up on my screen. It took me a moment to connect the dots. When it hit me, I lost it. I started yelling in my office, shaking with rage. Em heard me and came to see what was wrong. The moment she opened the door, I told her to get out. I spent the rest of the day locked in my office, silently staring at the walls, trying to process it all. That night, I called one of my closest friends, T, the groom from the wedding where Em and I met. I told him I needed to grab a drink. He must have heard the pain in my voice because he didn't hesitate. When we met at the bar, I laid it all out. Em was cheating on me. When I told him it was with Jay, he looked shocked and furious. T was the one who introduced me to Jay. He apologized repeatedly, but I told him it wasn't his fault. I asked him to keep quiet for now since I hadn't confronted Em yet or started the legal process. We drank and talked until the bar closed, and then I took an Uber home. When I got back, Em was asleep on the couch. I didn't wake her. I went straight to bed, my mind racing with everything I had to do. The next morning I got up, dressed, and left the house without saying a word. I buried myself in work all day, avoiding her texts and calls. That night, when I came home, she greeted me with dinner and asked if I wanted her to heat it up. I just shook my head, said no, and went to bed. But that night, she followed me into the bedroom, pestering me about what was wrong. She kept pushing until I snapped. I yelled at her to leave me alone. The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer. Confirming our meeting later that day, when I went downstairs, Em had made breakfast. She started talking about how I'd been acting differently and demanded to know what was going on. I lied and told her work had been stressful. Then I left to meet my lawyer. At the meeting, I handed over all the evidence I'd gathered. The lawyer told me that because we lived in an at-fault state, Em wouldn't be entitled to much of my money. That hadn't even crossed my mind. I just wanted the marriage over. I told him I wanted the papers served without warning. He said that would take about 2 weeks. When I got home, I decided it was time to confront her. I called her phone several times, but she didn't answer. Finally, I texted her. "I don't care if you're with Jay right now. Get home. We need to talk." She called back almost immediately, sounding panicked. When she got home, I confronted her with all the evidence. She tried to deny it, but when I showed her the messages and photos, she broke down. She cried, apologized, and begged me to forgive her. She even offered to make it up to me in the bedroom. But I told her I'd never touch her again. I told her everything was already with my lawyer and that I was divorcing her. Then I told her to pack a bag and leave. That was 3 days ago. I haven't heard from her since. After discovering my wife's affair and starting the divorce process, I had to face the reality of everything that needed to be done. The emotions were overwhelming, but I focused on taking action. First, I scheduled a doctor's appointment to get tested for STDs. It was a terrifying thought, but I needed to know for sure. My appointment was set for 2 days later. Next, I started reaching out to the people closest to me. I told my father and a few close friends about the situation. Their support was immediate. They offered advice, asked if I needed help, and assured me I wasn't alone. It was comforting to know I had people in my corner. After that, I reached out to Em's family. I sent a message to her parents, thanking them for welcoming me into their family and saying I was grateful for everything they had done for me. Then I broke the news. I told them Em and I were divorcing and that I would miss them. Of course, that wasn't entirely true. Her parents were kind but overbearing, and I wasn't too upset about not having to deal with them anymore. It took a while for her parents to respond, so I moved on to her sister, W. This part was harder because W and I had become close friends. I knew this news would strain our relationship. I sent her a text explaining what was happening and told her how much I appreciated the friendship we'd shared. I also said I'd always be there if she needed anything. When Em's parents finally replied, they sounded shocked. They asked, "What happened? Why hasn't Em said anything to us?" I replied, "Em has been having an affair for at least a year. I suspect it started even before our wedding. I'm not sure why she hasn't reached out to you, but you should probably call her." Their next message came quickly. "We're so sorry she did this to you. We'll try to get in touch with her. Are you sure about the affair?" I replied, "I'm absolutely sure. I've seen the texts." They apologized again, saying they'd reach out to her and thanked me for letting them know. Later, I received a message from W. She said Em had shown up at her house, crying, and told her that we were having problems, but insisted everything would blow over in a few days. Who asked Em why I would file for divorce if it was just a rough patch. That's when Em finally broke down and admitted to everything. You apologized to me for what her sister had done and said she would always be there for me, no matter what. Hearing that meant more than I could express. I had been so worried that this mess would ruin my friendship with W. Once I had informed everyone I needed to, it was time to contact Jay's fiancé. Yes, Jay had a fiancé. That was another layer of betrayal I couldn't ignore. I sent her a text around 2 p.m. and asked if we could meet for coffee. To my surprise, she agreed right away. We met at some hipster coffee shop near her work at 2:30. When she arrived, I wasted no time. "There's no easy way to say this," I said. "Jay has been cheating on you with my wife. It's been going on for over a year." When she arrived, I wasted no time. "There's no easy way to say this," I said. "Jay has been cheating on you with my wife. It's been going on for over a year." She looked shocked, her face frozen in disbelief. I told her how I found out and offered to show her the evidence I had gathered. When I handed her the binder, she flipped through it, her hands trembling. Tears streamed down her face as she read through the messages and photos. I told her she could take the binder with her if she wanted to confront Jay or keep it for herself. She thanked me quietly, got up and walked out, looking completely devastated. Later that night, I sat on my back porch with a drink in my hand, trying to process everything. My world had fallen apart, and the pain was overwhelming. I decided to give myself this week to grieve and let it all sink in. After that, I'd focus on picking up the pieces and moving forward. I started packing up M's things the next day. Clothes, jewelry, photos, and even our wedding album. I boxed it all up and put it in the garage. I wanted her out of my house and out of my life. I didn't destroy anything, even though I was tempted. The only thing I broke was a picture frame or two. Other than that, I handled her belongings with care, if and when she came back for her stuff. I didn't want her to have any excuse to blame me for ruining anything. At this point, everything was in motion. My lawyer was hard at work, and I had done everything I could to protect myself. The only thing left was to wait. I had no idea what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this break me. After breaking the news to everyone and setting things in motion, life started to feel like a waiting game. I had taken all the right steps, but the reality of what was happening weighed on me every single day. To distract myself, I threw myself into a mix of productivity and self-care. I went to my doctor and got tested for STDs, thankfully. The results came back clean, but that wasn't much of a surprise, since our sex life had been nearly non-existent for months. Still, it gave me peace of mind. Next, I reached out to Jay's fiancée again to check on how she was doing. She told me she had moved in with her family and kicked Jay out of their shared house. Her father and brother had packed all of his things and dropped them off at his place. She admitted that her family wanted her to forgive him and move forward, but she wasn't sure what she wanted. I offered to meet up and talk, and she agreed. We met at the same coffee shop where I had told her everything. Over the next 2 hours, we poured our hearts out. She asked if I was considering reconciling with M, and I told her absolutely not. I explained that for me, cheating was the ultimate deal breaker. It wasn't just the act of infidelity. It was the lying, the disrespect, and the sheer selfishness it took to keep the affair going for over a year. There was no way I could ever look at M the same way again. When I asked her about her plans, she admitted she felt torn. Her family was pressuring her to forgive Jay and marry him, but her gut told her something wasn't right. I told her to trust that feeling. Your heart might lie to you. Your brain might try to rationalize everything, but your gut, that's almost always the truth. I said. By the time we left, she seemed a little more at peace. I told her I'd be there if she ever needed someone to talk to, and we went our separate ways. Back home, things took a turn. My lawyer told me M had finally been served the divorce papers, at work, no less. Shortly after that, you called me, sounding concerned. She said M hadn't left her room all day and had been crying nonstop. I told her the truth. M was probably just realizing how badly she had messed up. I was fully prepared for M to show up at my house in a fit of rage. I made sure all the cameras inside and outside were working, and I told one of my friends to be ready to come over if things got out of hand. Sure enough, she came storming over that night. She banged on the door, screaming for me to let her in. She was crying and yelling, calling me every name under the sun. I stayed calm and didn't open the door. Instead, I called my friend and W, asking them to come over immediately. My friend showed up first and started recording everything from his truck. For some reason, he brought his wife along, and she decided to step in to try to calm M down. It didn't go well. When his wife tried to talk to M, she snapped. M slapped her across the face, screaming for her to stay out of our business. That was the breaking point. My friend stopped recording and called the police. The officers arrived about 10 minutes later, and M immediately started putting on a show. She cried and told the police I had hit her and thrown her out of the house. One of the officers came to my door and started cuffing me before I could even say a word. Thankfully, I kept my cool. I told the officer I had video evidence proving I hadn't done anything. I pulled out my phone, showed him the footage from my security cameras, and he watched as M's lies unraveled. The officer apologized and let me go, but M wasn't so lucky. They arrested her for disturbing the peace, public intoxication, and DUI. Watching her get put in the back of a police car was surreal. W showed up shortly after the police arrived. I showed her the video of what had happened, and she looked as stunned as I felt. She asked if she could stay the night at my house, and I said yes. The next morning, W was gone before I woke up. She texted me later saying she had gone to meet with her parents. Apparently, M had called them from jail, and they were trying to figure out how to bail her out. I spent the rest of the day reflecting on everything that had happened. It felt like my life had turned into some sort of soap opera, and I was the unwilling star of the show. But I was determined not to let it break me. I don't know what Em expected when she decided to cheat on me, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end the way she hoped. After Em's meltdown at my house and her night in jail, things finally started moving forward. The day after she was arrested, my lawyer informed me that Em had finally hired her own lawyer. This meant the divorce process could begin in earnest, and I was more than ready to put this nightmare behind me. I reached out to Jay's fiancée again to check on her. She told me she'd officially kicked him out of their house. Her father and brother had packed all of his belongings and dropped them off at his place. She said her family wanted to beat him up, but she had asked them not to. All she wanted was to move on and leave him in the past. She thanked me for checking in on her and told me she had good friends supporting her. I shared the link to my posts online and told her about all the support people were giving her. It seemed to lift her spirits a little, which made me happy. On Friday, after a long week of work, I was ready to escape to my cabin for the weekend. I pulled into my driveway and saw W waiting for me. She said she had a list of things Em wanted from the house and asked if she could pick them up. I skimmed the list. Almost everything was already boxed up and in the garage. I told W I wasn't going to touch or transport anything else. I'll hire a moving company to pack and take it all. I don't want Em accusing me of damaging her stuff, I said. You seemed relieved and told me that was a great idea. As she loaded a box of Em's clothes into her car, she suddenly asked, "Can I come with you to the cabin this weekend?" I hesitated for a moment, but I could tell she needed a break. "Sure," I said. "Go home, drop off the box, and pack a bag. I'll wait for you." By the time I had finished shopping for supplies and packing up the truck, View was back. We hit the road and headed to the cabin. The weekend was peaceful. The cabin is secluded, surrounded by beautiful nature, and far away from all the chaos. It was the perfect place to breathe and relax. I spent my time fishing, hiking, and sitting by the fire, and W seemed to enjoy the calm too. By Monday morning, it was back to reality. I called a moving company and scheduled a pickup for all of Em's belongings. When they arrived on Tuesday, I was ready. I opened every box and had the movers record everything as they packed. I didn't want Em claiming I had broken or destroyed anything. I even took pictures of all the furniture before it was loaded onto the truck. Once the movers were done, I sent all the recordings and pictures to my lawyer. The house felt empty without her things, but honestly, it was a relief. It felt clean. Like the toxic energy she brought with her was finally gone. I've decided I won't keep the house, even if I win it in the divorce. It holds too many bad memories, and I'd rather start fresh somewhere else. Em tried to stir up more trouble after the movers took her stuff. My lawyer received paperwork from her lawyer claiming I had destroyed her belongings and demanding $500 in damages. I couldn't believe the audacity. My lawyer responded immediately, sending all the videos and pictures as evidence. He told her lawyer, "Not only is this claim baseless, but it will also make her look unhinged in front of a judge." He reassured me that these petty claims would only help my case in the long run. I was meticulous because I refused to become one of those people. You read about who gets blindsided in court. I documented everything. Every step I took was careful and deliberate, and I wasn't going to give Em any chance to twist the truth. Em started calling me every other day, but I never answered. If she left a voicemail, I didn't listen to it. I just forwarded it to my lawyer. He always told me the same thing. "You're making my job so much easier. I wish every client handled things like you." His praise gave me a sense of control in a situation that often felt overwhelming. About 2 or 3 weeks later, my lawyer told me we had enough evidence to settle this without going to court. He scheduled a meeting in a neutral lawyer's office and told me to prepare myself. "No matter what she says, don't react. Everything will be recorded, and anything you say could come back to haunt you," he warned. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. When the day arrived, I was surprised to see Em already there when we walked in. She looked nervous and avoided making eye contact. The lawyers began by discussing terms. Em's lawyer tried to push for more, but my lawyer shut him down. "We have a mountain of evidence of infidelity and inappropriate behavior. What we're offering is already generous. Half the proceeds from the sale of the house, and half of the savings account. That's more than she would get in court," he said. Then he looked directly at Em and added, "If you take this to court, I'll make you read every single text message aloud. I'll show every photo and have you explain what's happening in each one. I'll also bring up your recent charges and play the video of you causing a scene at his house. Do you really want to put yourself through that? Em burst into tears and looked at me. Isn't there anything I can do to fix this? She asked. I stayed calm and replied, You've been cheating on me since before our wedding. There's nothing you can do to fix this. Sign the papers. It's more than you deserve. She cried for about 15 minutes before excusing herself to the restroom. When she returned, still sniffling, she signed the papers and walked out without saying another word. Now it's just a matter of filing everything and selling the house. After that, I'll finally be free. After everything that's happened, I finally feel like this nightmare is coming to an end. The day Em signed the divorce papers felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. But I knew it wasn't completely over yet. The day after the meeting, my lawyer filed all the paperwork. Now it's just a matter of time before everything is finalized. Once the house is sold, I'll be done with this chapter of my life. I tried to focus on moving forward. But Em wasn't ready to let go. She started calling me constantly, leaving voicemails begging me to talk to her. I ignored every single one and forwarded them straight to my lawyer. I refused to give her any opening to manipulate me. One of the voicemails I forwarded led my lawyer to call me. Laughing, "You're a lawyer's dream client," he said. "You've done everything right from the start. This divorce is going smoother than most because you've been so meticulous." Hearing that reassured me that I'd made the right decisions. Em's lawyer also seemed to be running out of steam. After my lawyer sent him all the evidence and recordings from the movers, he stopped pursuing her ridiculous claims that I had damaged her belongings. It became clear that Em was grasping at straws, trying to claw back some control, but it wasn't working. While all of this was happening, I kept in touch with W. She's been one of my biggest sources of support throughout this entire ordeal. She's the one person in Em's family who hasn't taken her side or tried to make excuses for her behavior. W stopped by the house one afternoon to grab a few more things for her sister. While she was there, she asked how I was doing and how I was handling everything. I told her I was trying to stay busy and focus on the positives. She smiled and said she was proud of me for keeping it together, especially after everything Em put me through. We talked for a while, and as she left, she gave me a hug and said, "You're going to be okay. You've got this." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. Meanwhile, Jay's fiancé finally got back to me. She told me she had officially broken things off with him. Her family still wanted her to reconcile, but she made it clear to them that she deserved better. She thanked me for being honest with her and for giving her the proof she needed to walk away. She also said she'd been reading all the support I'd received online and that it had inspired her to stand her ground. It felt good to know that in some way, we were both finding strength in each other's stories. As for the house, I've already started planning to sell it, even though it's legally still mine until the divorce is finalized. I don't want to stay here. The memories are too painful. I've started packing up my things and getting ready for a fresh start somewhere new. I've also been replacing the furniture Em and I shared. The new pieces make the space feel less like a home we built together and more like a clean slate. It's oddly therapeutic to see the physical evidence of her slowly being erased from my life. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. When I first found out about the affair, I thought my life was over. I couldn't see past the anger and heartbreak. But now, I realize this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something better. I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this. From the advice you've shared to the encouragement you've given, it's helped me more than you know. If even one person going through a similar situation can learn from my experience, then sharing my story was worth it. This might be the last update I post because, honestly, there's not much left to say. The divorce is nearly final, the house will be sold, and I'll be free to move on with my life. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that no matter how dark things seem, you can always find a way forward. It might take time and it might be messy, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you all again. Here's to better days ahead.